Reality. We take it for granted more often than we'd like to admit. We go to sleep at night and have confidence the sun will rise the next day. We trust the solid ground beneath our feet won't suddenly disappear and send us tumbling into an abyss. Things like matter, physics, and even metaphysics must follow the rules that have been written into the universe. How these rules were originally written will be the subject of philosophical debate till the end of time. But in this universe, on this star, a fundamental building block of creation that all rules must follow is Aether. The simplest definition of Aether I can give is that it is a raw, continuous energy of creation without a persistent form. Like a current, it always flows, always moves, fulfilling no purpose outside of existing. Like countless threads, it weaves itself through all things, making whole the fabric of our reality and interacting with things within it differently as a result. It's so fundamental to creation that, by our understanding, this world as we know it could not and would not exist without it. As such, if scholars and intellectuals did not know about the existence of Aether, understanding the world and its various phenomena would be limited at best and impossible at worst. It also means we'd have no knowledge of the fundamentals of our own existence and life as a whole. After all, Aether is the foundation on which the temple of life itself is built. From the smallest plant and insect to the largest behemoth and monster, none of them would exist without it. Each and every entity has its own personal pool or source of continuous Aether. It stimulates their life, and while younger, trained individuals can have a vast reservoir to pull from, other, older individuals or ones suffering a form of corruption have much smaller pools to tap and are generally weaker. However, if for whatever reason this personal Aether is drained completely, the entity will die, regardless of health or injury. Not even the low traces of Aether that make up their physical body will save them if the source is gone. As such, life and Aether are two words that are sometimes used interchangeably during some discussions and studies. That is also why our star is considered so often to be a living thing. With Aether as her lifeblood, we lovingly refer to our world as Hydaelyn, the mother of all things. As a living world, Hydaelyn is theorized to exist in two realms simultaneously, the corporeal and the ethereal. The corporeal realm is the one we persist in, a realm of matter and physics. The ethereal realm is its shapeless, metaphysical reflection in the source of our star's Aether. The two realms are in constant balance with one another, so if one is ever horribly damaged or deformed, it'll affect the other in turn. There are even places where the boundary between the two realms becomes thin, like the Anti-Tower. But their close connection is why teleportation via aetherite is possible in the first place. By using an aetherite crystal as an anchor, you're literally throwing yourself into the ethereal realm and then re-emerging at your destination on the physical plane, moving much faster than possible in the corporeal realm. If we didn't have aetherite crystals to ground ourselves to the physical plane, then our very souls would get lost in the ethereal realm, or lifestream as it is often called. While the ethereal realm is a chaotic river of creation energy, the corporeal realm is where Aether gains form and substance. When becoming material, Aether lends itself to one of 6 elements. To help elaborate on that, we need only look at the most basic of aetheric charts. Almost everyone has seen this chart, but I shall start at the beginning for those who don't understand what they're looking at, and I shall quote, "The spark of lightning ignites when it strikes, and thus fire is born. The heat of fire rends to ash all that it touches, and thus earth is born. The density of earth shuns the sun and harbors cold, and thus ice is born. The armor of ice melts away, and thus water is born. The moisture of water mists and rises, and thus wind is born. The gusts and sighs of wind gather the clouds, and thus lightning is born anew. Within this cycle, the 3 conquests, boundless and unwavering. Earth grounds the lightning, water erodes the earth, and lightning boils the water. It continues, the 3 submissions, timeless and unending. Fire is extinguished by wind, ice is melted by fire, and wind is obstructed by ice. Lastly, dynamic opposites and the bifurcation of polarity. The 6 elements are manifest in all things great and small, and their polarity deriveth from the astral heavens above and the umbral depths below. What I just finished reciting are the fundamentals when it comes to understanding elemental Aether. On its own, these forces are wild and without masters, doing only what is within their nature. Their existence gives both form and function to our world just by existing. These elements are always trying to remain mostly balanced within all forms of life, though it is also true that many creatures and even people are predisposed to certain elemental affinities. But when one element is overstimulated, the results can become dangerous. Some side effects of imbalance are mental degradation, irreversible mutations, and even physical corruption. This includes astral and umbral aspects. The easiest way to explain these 2 aspects is that of a positive charge on one end of a line and a negative charge on the other end. The closer you get to the middle of that line, the more neutral the Aether becomes. An element that's more astrally charged is considered more volatile and reactive. However, if an element is more umbrally charged, it's more passive and enduring. For example, astral fire would be considered a raging inferno and easily provoked. Meanwhile, umbral fire would be described as a stifling dry heat that's hard to escape. Allow me to add that while these are the basic understood principles of elemental Aether, research on their behavior has been ongoing for thousands of years, meaning anything could change given the proper study. But what happens when something with will grabs hold of these forces and gives them focus? To take hold of, shape, and direct elemental energy creates unnatural phenomena. It creates magic. Magic can be defined as anything that uses Aether outside of its naturally occurring states. Almost anything can use magic, even monsters. For example, have you ever seen a raptor breathe fire, or a biast shoot lightning? They don't have physical properties that allow this to happen naturally. The monsters are instinctively using their own Aether or the Aether around them to cause these actions to occur. The same can be said for all mages as well. While the usage of Aether both within and without differs from school to school, the basic principles are universally the same. They're taking energy from whatever source necessary, and through different means of shaping and directing, they create and release what we call spells. Most spells are as diverse as your imagination will allow. One simply needs the required Aether to create it and the focus to control it. Some physical objects can be made with etheric stimulation in mind, making them more receptive to your control over Aether. This practice applies to things like an astrologian's globe, a red mage's focus, and recently, the sage's newliths. While not technically flying on their own, these objects are suffused with enough Aether to be allowed to float and move freely as long as they're close to their host. As you can guess, since Aether is so fundamental to the creation and persistence of our world and its life, its flexibility is unparalleled. Through its power, magic can do almost anything, be almost anything, so long as you have enough of it. But just because you can doesn't mean you should. Some magics have scarred the land and killed innocent people due to the caster's overconfidence. One need only look at many umbral calamities to see the result of such. That being said, the extent of spells one can create is so vast I could never truly explain it all, because there's nothing stopping someone from trying to do something new by the time I'm finished. Eventually, I'd like to cover the most popular schools of magic, but for now, let us remain focused. So, even though all life has its own Aether, and the potential to use the Aether around them, not everyone can become a mage. Some creatures, and even people, are born with extremely weak connections to the Aether around or inside them. What causes this is unknown and changes depending on who you ask, but it's theorized that something agitates the entity's personal Aether into becoming closed off from the energy in the world around them. Like stated earlier, no etheric control, no magic. But that isn't to say that this energy has completely abandoned someone. For example, a pure-blooded Garlean is recognizable by the stone-like protrusion in their forehead that acts like a third eye. Almost all of these Garleans are born without any suitable connection to Aether and as such cannot use magic. However, as almost a consolation of some kind, their bodies are more enriched by their personal pools of Aether, making them much stronger and resilient than nature usually allows. This is due to stimulating one's personal Aether enough to create stronger physical effects. With proper training and discipline, one can perform seemingly superhuman actions simply by encouraging their energy to empower them. As an example, the monks of Alamigo use what they call chakra to turn a normal punch into one that could shatter a boulder 10 times their size. That is because these chakras are simply different levels of Aether they're forcing to flow through their bodies, thus making the strike that much more powerful. Whether the person knows it or not, Aether is the thing making them stronger than their bodies could ever physically allow. The last aspect of Aether we'll discuss is its unique interaction with crystals. Normally, when something dies of natural causes, like old age, its personal pool of Aether becomes spent, like a vehicle running out of fuel. This releases their essence, or spirit, to return to the life stream in the ethereal realm. However, when something dies from excess trauma, like being mauled by a monster or stabbed by a spear, the contained pool of Aether inside that body is released all at once as the entity dies. Even harvesting things like plants releases small bursts of Aether as you cut its life short. The entity's soul, if present, still returns to the life stream, but there is now excessive and unused amounts of energy left behind on the world's surface. Huge amounts of damage to the planet will release this excess of Aether as well. However, if a deceased entity wasn't already predisposed to a certain elemental type, the dominant element in that area will slowly condense and shape that lingering energy into what we see as crystals. This is why large-scale crystal deposits are often found where the planet has suffered a grievous wound or where large-scale battles have taken place. All that lingering energy that was released slowly began to condense into crystalline forms. As you know, these crystals, being raw energy in physical form, have many uses. From heating a smith's forge, freezing perishables, and even acting as a power source for magic and spells. This led some people to try and devour crystals to gain power, but I strongly advise against it. While it's completely safe to use crystals to make food and items, the consumption of raw elemental crystals is poisonous and can cause such a sudden shift in your body's elemental balance that you will either be crippled for life or die immediately. It's impossible to talk about Aether in simple terms since it's involved in literally everything. From building block to life giver, magic maker, and physical enhancer, the true limits of Aether are unknown and keeps the rules of our reality balanced and in check. We all need Aether to survive. So if this necessary fabric was made to undo itself, we would see the end days sooner than expected. Good day! Thank you for staying to the end of my lesson. It's my hope that you found something new and interesting in between my ramblings. If you did, consider subscribing and liking this video. Doing that is the easiest way to tell me I'm doing a good job at feeding your thirst for knowledge. If there is a topic you'd love to learn more about that I've yet to cover, let me know in the comments and I'll see where my research takes me. I'd also encourage you to share what you learned here with your friends and adventuring companions, and if they're interested, bring them to the next assembly. I hope to see you and any other curious travelers in the next lecture. Till then, stay safe, my friends.